Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone doing today? Yes, I just had a Diet Coke, and I am full of caffeine. How are you all doing? I personally am trying to find space in my life for meaningful activities. Trying to. You know, we found a flea on Mabel yesterday, so that meant an entire day of cleaning and doing laundry, just in case. Doesn't seem like there was anything more than one flea, and it died because of her flea medication. But still, you can't be too careful. Los Angeles is really all the bad parts of a city and all the bad parts of a suburb kind of smushed together into a, I don't even want to say city, an area of land. But you know what's one of the good things about this town? Why, my guest today is from here. And who is that, Andy? Why, it's Jeff Martin. If you don't know who Jeff is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Los Angeles, California, musician Jeff Martin started playing piano when he was but a mere toddler. In 1992, he formed the band Idaho with his high school friend John Berry, though Berry would leave a few years later, making Idaho primarily Jeff's project. The band first signed to Caroline, who released their first 3 albums and an EP, but with their breakthrough album in 2000, Hearts of Palm, they began releasing music on their own Idaho music label. And their latest, Laps, will be released at the end of May. And, you know, usually I say how good the album is. I just haven't heard it yet. That's it. You know, the couple tracks I've heard are very good, though. So I'm going to assume it is a enjoyable album. I like everything else Jeff has ever written. You know, this is another band that I discovered back at WPTS 92.1 FM when I was a DJ in college. I've continued to enjoy Jeff's music for the last 2 decades. It's a lot of time. Sorry, I had a rush of existence hitting me. You know, that kind of temporal feeling. But yeah, this was quite a joy to talk to him. Jeff's a delight. Super personable. That's what you're always looking for when you're doing an interview. You're hoping just that you click with the person, and it's not like a game of Operation where you're very carefully trying to pull bones and hearts out of them without touching the sides. Jeff grew up in Brentwood. We'll talk about what that means. If you don't know the different neighborhoods of the city, maybe you'll remember that OJ lived there. Hey, R.I.P. to a true hero. So Jeff grew up there, but a couple decades before OJ. So we'll talk about what that was like. A lot of other stuff. This is fun. I hope you like it. And if you do, folks, and this is your first episode, I'd like to do a little recommended if you like here. I've done this show for over 14 years, talked to hundreds of musicians and writers and actors and performers, journalists. So you can always just jump into the back catalog, grab an episode at random, just look. But that's a lot of episodes, so what I like to do here is a little recommended if you like. Jeff's a musician. Maybe you'll like other musicians I've had on the show. This is just a sampling of some recent guests that I've had on. Ben Chasney from 6 Organs of Admittance, Mark Robinson, Unrest, and the founder of Teen Beat Records, Andrew Kenny from American Analog Set, Evan Dando, Marnie Stern, Will Butler. I think Will just got a bunch of Tony nominations for Stereophonic. Who else? Andrew Savage of Parquet Courts. So check out those episodes. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the show. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I think you can do it on Spotify too. I don't know. I'm on social media. Mostly the only one that's fun anymore is Instagram, at Andy Beckerman. And coming up, I did a bunch of really cool interviews the last couple of weeks. We got Marina Allen and Sour Widows. I just talked to Susan Coyne, who's the co-creator of the wonderful show Slings and Arrows. I talked to Jim Mickle, showrunner for Happen Leonard and Sweet Tooth, also the director of one of my favorite films of the last decade, Cold in July. That was very cool, and he's from like a couple miles outside my hometown, so it was cool to talk to a fellow Pennsylvanian. So stay tuned for those, but for now, let's talk to Jeff.
Are you a musician?
I am. I can. I do.
Is that a keyboard? Okay, yeah.
That is a Acetone organ.
Ooh, like a vintage Acetone.
Yeah.
Ooh, how cool.
That was when I worked in a library after college before grad school, and I was just making slightly more than my rent and food, and a little extra money to go to the bowling alley or the movies or something like that. And so I saved up and bought an Acetone on eBay because I'm like, I want to sound like Yo La Tengo.
Oh, is that what I was going to say? Who uses one of those? And I didn't know that, and they're one of my favorite bands in the world.
Yeah, the organ sound on Blue Line Swinger is an Acetone organ.
It's funny. I thought it was a Farfisa that they use, but now to come to think of it, it's not that Farfisa sound. Maybe they do in other things, but I almost recognize that from their stage or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I embarrassingly, so I used to be, I'm not a musician, I'm a writer and a podcaster, but when I used to be in a band in college, I remember we were a Casio pop band, and so it was like 8 Casios, a very minimal drum kit, and an acoustic guitar. Not 8 Casio at once, but we would have this big thing and we would all rotate going to different Casio and stuff. Okay. So we were really into Casios, and Yo La Tengo used one in, and then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out, something like that. Anyway, they used a Casio on that, and they were doing it on their tour. So we saw them and we went up afterwards and we were asking Ira, hey, what is that? What's the Casio? Because we haven't seen that one before. And he's like, let me check. And they had like some masking tape over the name of it because with like some notes on it, like which settings to use. And he spent, I swear to God, it felt like 5 minutes trying to peel off the thing while we were standing there awkwardly. It couldn't have been more than like 45 seconds at most, but it felt like it took forever. Like we asked this very dumb question, and then he's sitting there peeling this tape off. He's still on stage. They're tearing down.
Amazing.
And I still hold that embarrassment in me to this day. I don't know if you're that kind of person to hold shame within you.
Completely.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, listen to my music. Come on.
Well, here's the thing. I never know.
No, I'm half kidding.
Okay. I never know when sometimes people will write from the point of view of a character. So I never know what's like
I don't do that.
Endemic to your own emotional structure, or whether it's a person writing as a character. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I never write as a character. I don't think. I mean, we all potentially take on a sort of a voice or take on a point of view that might fit into the kind of scene that I'm seeing. But I think it's pretty personal. I mean, I think it's a wonderful skill to be able to do that. I mean, I really envy. I mean, you're a writer, and I've tried to write and had a pilot kind of idea, and I ended up shooting the first episode. And gosh, writing is so. I'm so impressed with people that can do it well. But I have to come from that solipsistic, that personal place.
Are you trapped in your own consciousness? Do you know what I mean? Like that, where like I can get out of it to write, but I think most of the time I'm kind of trapped in my own experience. Yeah. And I literally mean trapped. Like in my mind, I'm in a prison.
I think I know what you mean. I remember though, who was it? Some writing coach, famous guy. Was it McKee, Robert McKee, or somebody said, you really do, or this is just a common sort of idea that we're universally, people are more similar than we think we are. Yeah. And if you really write from a personal place, it's going to resonate with somebody because we all share so much. We have so much in common. So much more than we would like to think. That if you come from that place, but it's funny, like really good actors. So many of my favorite actors really seem like they're kind of being themselves most of the time, and you really can't go wrong with that approach. Interesting.
Well, actually, I mean, this is a good entree into discussing growing up in this town, because this is no, you, right? Oh. Didn't you grow up in like Brentwood? Isn't that where you're from?
Yeah.
No, I'm from the other side of the country. This is very foreign to me. We've been here for 7 years now, and I'm still not used to it.
Right. Was it New York? Where did you?
Yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania originally, but we were in New York for, a decade, and my wife's from New York. So I am whenever I meet someone who is from here, I am extremely intrigued, because I am, what is the experience? Especially Brentwood is a fairly she part of the city. So, what was it like being a child there?
Well, I mean, I can't compare it to much because that's all I knew,
Sure.
But it wasn't very shishi in the 60s, 70s yet. It was still kind of middle class, upper middle class, kind of. It's not what it became, I think, more in the late 80s, 90s. But, it was very quiet, and only about 20 years before I was born in 64, it was just rabbit hunting fields and stuff. So it still had a little bit of that bucolic kind of. It wasn't so frenetic and soccer moms and. You allowed to say that anymore? Soccer mom?
Yes, I don't think that is. I don't think it's misogynistic in any way.
Right. So it was kind of an idyllic childhood, though, because well, I mean, to speak to the larger picture of growing up in Brentwood. I mean, it was special. I mean, we were next to nature. My father designed the house that we ultimately moved into when I was probably 8, and there was a canyon behind it, and we were just set loose at an early age out there with our friends. And my girlfriend's kids are 8 and 9. I mean, she doesn't let them go anywhere, really. I mean, and she's pretty free-spirited and would probably do it before most parents. But it was a magical place in a sense. I mean, it was near the ocean, and I went to public school initially before Crossroads, which is a whole other story. But have you heard of Crossroads School? Yeah. And the kids in the neighborhood, we'd all just meet up on our Hot Wheels and go into the water, sort of go into places we shouldn't, and it was very much a childhood that a lot of people in cities don't have anymore. I like to think it infected sort of my approach to my art in a sense, because I do have a nostalgia for it, and I kind of sing about it sometimes. It was funny that when I remember when O.J. Simpson got, I was older then and recording my second Idaho record, but all the helicopters came over my parents' house where I was recording. Oddly enough, as a 31-year-old adult, I still had my studio at my parents' house, and it was kind of dawned on me how sort of upper heeled Brentwood had become, especially when it got all the attention from the media when that happened, and I was hearing about who lived right around me, us at that point. But yeah. I don't go back there now much at all. I find it very kind of dull. I discovered the eastern parts of Los Angeles as in my 20s, and never really looked back. I mean, I'm kind of contradicting myself because I do have a fondness for those early childhood years, running around in the eucalyptus groves and everything. And I'm glad I didn't stay there. A lot of my friends got stuck there. And actually, there's a song on the new record called I'm forgetting what it's called, but we can insert it. I'll figure it out in a second. Where I talk about how I've lost touch with the friends of mine that stayed there and kind of took on their parents' kind of approach and everything, and I don't really identify with them as much anymore, and love them dearly, but it definitely is something is a trajectory that I could have gone on and stayed there and didn't, and a lot of it has to do with meeting John Barry, who I started Idaho with, and who exposed me to all this wonderful stuff in the sort of subculture that was happening in the art world and everything.
Yeah. Okay. So that then I have to ask, and I was just talking about this on another episode recently, that I seem kind of just existentially or constitutionally allergic to the suburbs that I grew up in. And there was nothing wrong with them. Again, I always feel like I have to keep kind of just like putting as many asterisks as possible. There was nothing wrong. It was great, nice place to grow up. Mm-hmm. My parents are lovely people. There's nothing wrong with it. But it just seemed sterile and dead. And that wasn't what that didn't excite me. Okay. And there are plenty of my friends who are living in these suburban areas. Okay. So asterisk, 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 end note, end note, end note, blah, blah, blah. Did you feel constitutionally allergic in the same way that I'm saying this to it? And that pushed you even before me? Like, did you feel like there was something wrong with where you were growing up? Even if it was bucolic. I loved roaming around farmland with my friends, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't for me. There was something wrong with it that I just, like, on a molecular level did not feel good. Did you feel that too?
Oh, completely. Okay. Yeah, completely. I mean, I felt like I didn't fit into the sort of mindset and everything, and I thought something was terribly wrong with me, and it's sort of a little bit of it is being raised by people that came of age in the 50s, and my parents were just love them to death and appreciate them now as a 60-year-old to no end. But at the time, they were just a little bit too old to have had the sort of 60s thing open their consciousness a little bit in some way. So there was this kind of fearful, sort of squashing kind of a sort of point of view that it really didn't work for me. And I tried to follow this sort of prerequisite direction that a young person was supposed to do that. And I went to USC as a music composition major and just hated it. It's like I'm not going to be a classical pianist or even a composer. And so I don't think we're all cut out to follow in the steps, and sort of cellularly early on that it's not meant for you. So yeah, we're similar in that respect.
Yeah. Were you conscious of it, or was it just a feeling in you? Because I just didn't. I kind of knew it was like just a hovering awareness, and then I had to like really figure it out.
It was a hovering awareness, exactly. And sometimes it takes a touchstone, a person to sort of show you that there's another way of life, and that was, in a sense, for me, it was really John Barry. I had one person that started playing me crazy jazz stuff when I was in 8th grade, like Weather Report, and I thought, oh wow, there's this other world that's coming in that's really intriguing to me and has this danger and this excitement, and it was kind of but then John really exposed me to so much, and he saw my potential, which nobody was really, I was always the sort of kid that could play piano at school, like isn't Jeff talented? But nobody saw much further than just that sort of general description. But but John really saw that I had some kind of fire burning in here, and he was a real cheerleader for me, and yeah, so that was the turning point at like age 17 or 18.
Mm. Did your parents have expectations for you though?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I think I confused them a little bit. I was an odd child. I was very hyper and would shout crazy stuff, and I was, I was shy in one sense, but when I was in my element, I was a little crazy. It's funny. I was watching the Steve Martin documentary, and his humor came in, and it was so, you couldn't describe it. It was so ridiculous in a way, and I think I had that effect on my parents. They're like, "What is this kid?" I mean, there are tape recordings of me at age 7 just making up my own language and shouting into a tape deck while they're having a party in the next room, and my father comes in and scolds me, and I was just kind of a weirdo in a sense. I mean, and I think now there would be some descriptors for that. It could be a mild form of spectrum something or other, but
oh yeah, no, I get it. If I had been born a decade later, I would have been medicated to the gills on Ritalin.
yeah,
no, I was the same way. It's interesting, like you said, you have this tape recording that seems like very useful for therapy. I have to just go back into my brain and remember the time my mom called me weird or whatever, right? And I have to be like, oh yeah, there was this time and this time. Is it literally like, have you gone to that recording? Do you literally have it, or is this like just some memory that you have of this time?
I do have them. I mean, I've been an obsessive recorder of the past ever since early on. They gave me a tape deck, and I've always kept everything, and so I had to give a lot to Mark Davis, who did the Idaho documentary, which I probably could have given you a link to before this, but whatever. I mean, it's almost better that we.
I like going in cold. I mean, I know a handful of facts. I have a card. I went and did some investigating online.
Okay, good. That's good. I mean, it's going to be out soon, I think, on Prime and stuff, but. So yeah, I do have those recordings, and I don't go back a lot, but I do have them, and I'm trying to catalog them a little bit better now. But for the documentary, I gave him reams of stuff, and all my videos from the 80s and 90s, and when Idaho started, and I like being a fly on the wall in a sense. I think in the moment, I can be a little overwhelmed with all of the input, and something about recording and videotaping, I can go back and look at my life and really appreciate it a lot more. And so I do that incessantly, and it annoys some people. It's funny when you run across somebody that is just terrified of being filmed. My girlfriend has her best friend. I can't even have the camera on around her. And so, yeah, I mean...
here in Los Angeles, someone doesn't like to be filmed?
I know. Oh, my gosh.
Wait, do you really... Like, it really helps to have some kind of mediation between you and reality that you can then kind of go back and, like, really kind of see the scene later?
Oh, it really helps me. Yeah, it really helps me. I have a horrible memory, too. People remember, they remember being 4 years old and in vivid detail remember some event. And I have vague pictures in my mind, but being able to go back and see a sort of night with a few friends out in the 80s driving around and going to Haagen-Dazs and smoking pot or something and being ridiculous. It's like, it's amazing to me. It's not important to a lot of people to be able to do that. But, the latest generations just have all of this stuff anyway on their phones probably. So they're doing it kind of anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I don't film a lot of stuff, and also I have a bad memory. So I don't have a bad memory. Let me correct this.
Selective?
No, and I'm wondering if you're like this. It's just that I am not present. So when something's happening,
Same.
I'm just in my head thinking all the time. And so it like reality just kind of like, it's like I'm in a bus and reality's just like whizzing by.
Well put. I feel for you. That's similar.
Is there anything you've learned about yourself from going back and watching?
Oh yeah.
The world through the recordings you've made?
Yeah, I've learned that I'm a crazy gesticulator when I speak. I do this a lot, and learned that I'm running on about double speed about most people, and just would love it if I just sort of would settle down and not feel like I have to talk so much, and nothing too critical really. I'm not really, well, in a sense I think it's helped me because inherently as a child I was terrifying. I was very shy, and I think it helped me see that I'm not quite as pathetic as I thought I was. It's like, well, I'm actually a funny kind of guy who has it's sort of an interesting vibe. I mean, I think it helped in a way, in numerous ways, but I'm not sort of analyzing myself so much, although I'm pretty famous for being able to, early on, I think I was doing the selfie talk stuff, before it was a thing, because I have proof of that. And
like 1996, you're talking like a reality show confessional, talking to camera.
Completely. Oh yeah, on the road, at late in the hotel room, talking about the show and my sort of dreams about what should happen with Idaho. And yeah, it's as good as the documentary is. I mean, he literally just grazed the surface, I think, of using all of the media that I gave him well. But
to go back to your parents for a second, did they have like specific expectations of any kind of job they wanted you to have, or any kind of like, we want you to follow in our footsteps or in the family's footsteps, or et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's funny. My mother was never very aspirational. Is that the right word? She was raised in kind of Beverly Hills and just was supposed to be pretty and everything. And so she didn't really have much of a drive. I mean, she's a very kind of spiritual, not religious spiritual, but she's had a very wonderful life and has definitely affected people and helped people and everything. But so she didn't really put a ton of pressure on me, but my father really did. I mean, he bought his first car when he was 16, and making money is really tantamount. That's what you got to go do. And I didn't do too well in that department, but they all knew, I was so obviously an artist and a musician, and there's no way they would even feel that I'd be anything but that. So that said, they were kind of grooming me to be to be a classical pianist or a composer or something. I mean, they didn't really get my music. It was too oddball and not from their POV. It was weird, which is just normal. That sort of generational misunderstanding of what the next generation is doing. So they didn't know if I was really that great or not. And then, but there was definitely pressure. I mean, I always felt like I was letting them down. There wasn't, you see people accepting their Academy Awards or their Grammys, and very often their parents were really behind them. So those formative years, it's nice to have some form of support, psychological and everything. And I didn't get a ton of that from them. But, I mean, I forgive them. I mean, and they definitely did their best. And it was
sure. But it wasn't active discouragement. It was just a kind of, you just caught a whiff of it off of like, what is our son doing?
It was active. I felt it.
Oh. Oh,
I felt it. I mean, my father, who's a sweetheart now, really was a little. He wore it on his countenance. I mean, he was not happy with me, really. But a lot of that is just reflexive. I mean, that's how they feel about themselves, and they're projecting it. And people definitely take out their insecurities on their kids, and a lot of it is their own. But
was it something like once they found out that you were, I'll say piano prodigy or like good at piano, right? That they were like, that there was some kind of, again, I understand that Brentwood when you grew up is not the Brentwood now of mega wealth, right? But like it was still, I assume, like upper middle class or so, right? Mm-hmm. Were there any kind of like high society pretensions that, do you know what I mean? Like where like, oh, our son's a pianist, he's going to be playing piano at Lincoln Center or whatever is the kind of aspiration for that. Was that in their minds?
Well, I don't think they knew what any alternative was really for that world. They didn't see how it could happen through rock and roll or something so much. But yeah, there was a little bit of almost a snobbery there. Like our son is has to be better than that. I mean, he's not going to go off and have long hair and be, shouting at the top of his lungs. I mean, my dad, we were doing the first Idaho record when, John and I, we were mid to late 20s. Remember, he'd come downstairs and he'd hear it through the speakers and he'd go, blah, 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 blah. He'd make fun of it.
Now, did that sting? Or was it just like, oh, it's dad being dad?
A little bit of both. Uh-huh. Part of it's, I'm still sensitive about that stuff.
Sure.
So it did, but ultimately it didn't, because I was never going to. I was kind of a meteorite shooting through space just from birth. I was very insecure in some ways, but very driven, and the target is always there. Like, finish that song, or find that keyboard out in the world or something. So I'm a real manifester when I'm excited about something. And so all of that was painful, but I had a trajectory.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just hit with this memory. I remember my parents, when I started playing live, I remember they came and they saw it and they were excited about that, even though they didn't get it. But then I remember I must have been a junior, for Hanukkah, I wrote a song for my mom, a song for my dad, a song for my sister, and then I did a cover of a Superchunk song. And I made it for them, and I made, a 4-track, it's old school, right? Because this is 1999, maybe 2000. Mm-hmm. Okay. Gave it to them, complete just disinterest, just like, oh, thank you, that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And that to me has typified their attitude towards anything I've made since then. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's nice. Where that it's just like, what the fuck is this? Kind of underneath that.
Of course.
But they would never say that to me.
Yeah. Yeah. They're on a different radio channel, and it'd be naive to think that you really can permeate that in many ways. But why do we care so much? There's something about them being all our universe when we're young that we imprint on them, that we want their validation. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. We waste a lot of energy worrying about that stuff.
Well, I was a straight A student, so I was
that's good.
primed.
See, I wasn't.
I was primed to want parental pats on the head, right? I wanted authority figures to be like, you're doing good. Mm-hmm. And which I've just transferred from my parents and teachers to network executives and producers, where it's just like, I mean, I was joking, but not really. Like, we had sent in a draft. My wife and I had sent in a draft of a script to a producer we were working with. We had sold a show last year. And they're like, oh, it's very good. I'm like, so we get a sticker on it? And they're like, haha, yes, you get a sticker. And I'm like, no, really, we need this. We need your approval.
Would teachers put stickers on things?
Yeah, I mean, not in high school. Well, maybe in high school, but like really, it was more like they did it back in like grade school. But those stickers, I have not gotten over. I mean, I have. Sorry, I'm like wavering with this because I don't want you to think I'm like some kind of like stunted, 12-year-old.
Uh-huh.
I have gotten over it, but also I have not gotten over it. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, we are our sort of inner child, I think, stays there forever, We just have to learn how to make peace with it and help it along, That's amazing. So, the whole Hollywood kind of world that we live here with, I mean, I've delved in and out of it in ways and love it to death, but I feel like at this point at 60, I'm gonna stick with what I think I do best and just do music. I love making the videos. I have cameras and I love coming up with some idea. But I mean, even just having a sort of decent plot or a narrative, it's hard for me to think that way. I'm very abstract the way my brain works, and so. People are liking some of the new songs have lyrics that are a lot more obvious and where I'm kind of telling a story or talking about something more directly and it's resonating with some people that have heard the record. And so that's about as close to screenwriting as I'm going to get, I think.
Okay, wait. So your parents are born, what, like somewhere in the 40s?
1934, my father, and 1938, my mother.
Okay.
And they're both alive still. My dad's turning 90, and they don't live in LA anymore. But and they divorced when I was 33 or something. So they're that generation. It's
So they were teenagers in the 50s.
Late 40s, 50s.
Late 40s,
yeah.
Early 50s. Oh, right. Your dad, early
30s.
I
went to high school in the late 40s, 50s, and graduated, college then also.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like what era, and they're both from Los Angeles. You said your mom grew up in Beverly Hills.
My mother's from Westwood, Beverly Hills. My father was in Long Beach. Mother came from Southern parents, Louisiana. There was some money there for her grandfather started a Coca-Cola bottling company in Baton Rouge in like early 1900s and gambled most of his fortune away, but they were a family that didn't have to worry about much. And my father came from parents from Indiana and dairy farmer, very you got to work for every penny and shy and quiet and not that interesting. And my father and my aunt, his sister, weirdly enough, came out of this family not exposed to much at all, with amazing taste and a real appreciation for art and it's a strange thing that they're both like that. We're both that way, but I see a lot of. I see what I've taken from both of them in a way. I mean, the aesthetic sense, and my father's an architect, and I'm good with music is spatial also, and there's something
right.
where we and I'm very visual, and the visual part comes into the music making somehow. But they weren't obviously very in love or very well matched, and so I felt that tension. I mean. Growing up too, it wasn't a warm, super. They were loving in their own the best they could be, but to see two people not seem to really respect and love each other that much, affected me in many ways too. I mean, Idaho has a certain. Some people think it's a sadness to parts of it, but it could be infused in there because there's a part of me that
melancholy, maybe
melancholy, but I've always I like to have that undertone in music. Not always, but it's hard to figure out where that comes from completely, because I didn't suffer that much as a child. It was all psychological stuff. But
what brought them together? If there wasn't was there a deep attraction at first and then it kind of waned?
What brought them together? No, I mean, in a sense, my mother had a narcissist, very powerful, domineering mother that was really hard on my mom, and my mother did fall in love with a Swedish fella and wanted to marry him, and my grandmother, her mother wouldn't let her. She just said, "Nope, you're not moving to Sweden." And then my father was set up with my mother through an architect friend, and really. And people do this all the time. He fit the criteria that her mother would accept. He went to MIT. He was handsome. He was intelligent, and so my mother just kind of went along with it. And my mother was, beautiful and a lovely person. And my father fell for her enough, but it was almost like an arranged marriage. I feel like. And they couldn't, I want to say, oh, that happened more back then, but my girlfriend now, who I've been friends with for 20 years, married somebody 13 years ago and just tumbled into it because he was the first guy that she felt like really liked her. I mean, she had some serious
self-esteem.
She had some self-esteem issues, and she came from Appalachia, and living here was always shocking to her because she comes from another world. And but so it does happen. People will marry and they're not really that aligned.
Yeah. Well, there's this thing that I've noticed. There's a lot of people, and again, this is not a bad thing, but it's just that there's a lot of people that there's a script that they're handed early on in their lives.
Yep.
And they don't question it, or they don't question it enough to not follow it. And so they're just like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. I am cis het. I am supposed to have a spouse and a child. Yeah. And we're supposed to want these certain things, and I'm supposed to strive for them. And if I don't get them, then I'm going to be, if I don't have the whatever, the old version was the white picket fence type house, 2.5 children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you don't meet those, you have this like deep, abiding disappointment in your soul. Mm-hmm. That's, you didn't strive for this. And you also, and then maybe that also awakens this kind of thing. Like, did I even want that stuff in the first place? And so now you have the disappointment that you didn't reach these goals, and also this awakening kind of existential crisis in you. Those things don't play out well, and that's why I said, oh, there's nothing wrong with the script, but there kind of is, in the sense that, like, if you don't, you got to stick to it. You got to, if you can't improv. You can't go off page, right?
Right. Wait, what do you mean you can't go off page?
So if you're going to read the script of your life, of that society has handed you, you better stick to it word for word. You better be word perfect on that baby. Or else you're going to start getting those like little doubts and existential feelings that are going to lead to something, maybe good.
Yeah. Well, anxiety is ultimately not good for you,
Well, yeah. Did you sense that in your mom, at least? Did you sense anxiety, some kind of deep anxiety in her?
Yeah, I did. There was a sadness there. There was definitely, she didn't get to sow her oats in any way. I mean, she went from a real tough mother to a tough father who was kind of a know-it-all, and this is the way the house is going to look, and this is, and so she rebelled and left him and went off to France and had a lover, and she's had to wait till her mid-50s to kind of wake up and go do what she wanted to do, but she did it, and so that's great, but I did sense it as a child, I think, and I think it affected the way my romantic history with women that I would meet. I always felt like, I don't want to hurt their feelings because they're so delicate and sad, and so I lose my own narrative by acquiescing to what I feel like I have to be for them, and so it's taken me until 60 to have what I think is finally a really healthy, good relationship with somebody. And so, we do take on some of our parents' challenges, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Is this stuff you've explored in therapy, or have you kind of
Yeah.
like figured out on your own?
I think a mixture. Therapy definitely helped.
When did you start?
I started pretty late. I think I started when I was in my 40s. Yeah.
Was there a specific thing that you're like, did you hit a bottom and you're like, I got to do this? Or were you like, oh, therapy sounds like a nice thing?
I was hitting some sort of existential crisis, I think, in my... How old was I when I started seeing? In my 30s. I had a little bit of a... I didn't have an addiction issue because I don't have that, but there was a real love of escape. I'm an escapist in a sense, and music does that. And so in the 80s, at Crossroads, the cocaine came in, and I really loved...
Oh, wow.
I loved drugs, but I was never like a person that let them get the better of me. But I think after 15 years of that, I started to just become pretty disillusioned, and I was losing my drive, my enthusiasm for life, really, and in not in any major way, but I was that approach to life kind of ran its course, and I think my sister. It's funny because the woman that I ended up seeing as a therapist, when I first saw her, she didn't want to see me because she could tell I wasn't finished with that lifestyle in a sense. I mean, she says it now, and then I came to her years later, and then I was ready to kind of change my ways in a sense. But in some ways, I think the drug use was kind of a way. The positive was that it helped me deprogram from my parents' world in a sense, to kind of just shock your psyche in a little bit, and mushrooms and things that are a little bit more, they definitely were beneficial in some ways. So I don't regret any of it. And, I think I didn't do any irreparable harm to my body or psyche.
Sure. So wait, at what point, at what age do you start feeling kind of friction with your parents or with their way of life?
Wow. What age? Yeah. You have to be somewhat savvy to kind of be able to encapsulate that idea. You have to know that there's if I really dig deep down into my I want to say teenage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just like you're like kind of hyper, kind of like doing your thing, and then by the time you get to be in like 8th grade, 9th grade, something right there,
puberty. Yeah.
It really starts to dawn on you that this is not the right context for you.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, unfortunately, and for your show, it doesn't help. But as I said, my memory is not that great. It's not super acute, But I just remember really feeling disillusioned and this sort of real angst around them, at holidays, and just not wanting to be around them, and. The music was always my funnel to sort of express and to be free and to feel excitement and to get into that flow state, and there's no outside there's no judgment, there's nobody looking in. It was just me and my relationship with the creative force, whatever that is. So I had that always. So if anything, maybe the adversity in the family, was the fuel to it helped me stay in that situation where I would go back to that creative place a lot, and so it's an upside, I guess.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's anything like when I talk to people on this show, it's not like there's a one-to-one A happened in my past and now B happens here, right? It's not like that. It's just more like there is a bunch of things that kind of start pushing you in a certain direction versus a different direction that you could have taken. And it's just like, Yeah, there was something pleasurable about escaping into creativity for you that gave you respite or something from that tension.
Solace. Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't necessitate you're going to become a musician. It doesn't, there's no, again, like I said, it doesn't dictate where you're going to go, but it does nudge you in that direction versus any other direction you could have taken.
Completely. I mean, I'm one of those cases where I think it was obvious enough to most people that I was obsessed with the piano at age 2, and parents now, I got to get my child to take piano lessons, and they seem to kind of like it, but I got to push them. For me, I was self-propelled. It was like the piano. Oh my God, So I mean, it was obvious that that's what I was going to do. I couldn't really do anything else, really. I mean, I had a proclivity to I was a good artist in a sense, and I'm rediscovering that now through animation. I've animated the lyrics on some of my videos, and I discovered with the iPad you can do that, and I'm kind of feeling like, oh my God, I'm in 3rd grade again, making these shapes and you bringing textures in and everything. So, but as I said before, the music and the visual are very woven in together, at least in my somewhere in my brainstem. But so it was always the case that I was going to be creative in that way. I don't think my parents understood which direction it was going to take, but they weren't going. Well, they always, it's that cliche thing, like you're not going to make money doing that, So I think they worried a little bit, but they knew I was a musician. It was never ever up to question.
Do you remember? We're right at the end. There's a couple things I want to sew up. Do you remember what it was about the piano? I know this is 2, so most people don't have a good memory of 2 anyway. On top of you saying that like you don't have a great memory for your childhood, but do you remember what it was that piqued your interest or that felt right or resonated with you about the piano specifically?
Well, it's just, I think it'd be a hard thing to articulate, but there's something about just bathing in those frequencies, and it was probably on this sort of metaphysical, I don't know, level where there was something about the tones and the... Because it wasn't some highfalutin thing about like, ooh, the sort of major thirds stacked on or a pleasing. It really, it's kind of otherworldly. It felt so like this magical sort of world that would open up, and it was not. It didn't have these finite. It didn't have these definable terms to it. It just felt really wonderful, and the piano was just it was the easy thing to touch first as a child. You just have to do that, but it expanded. I mean, got an acoustic guitar. I was beating on the couches with drumsticks, and they did buy me a multi-track tape machine in the 70s. I mean, no kids got those then. They probably cost a lot of money, and so I was making my first record. I have a cassette that says "I'm Lost" on it. There's a picture of me with puka shells, on the beach, and I have 30 song ideas on there where I'm singing harmonies, and it's very primitive, but it was really the sort of best part of life for me. I mean, everything else was a little mundane and difficult for me, and that was where I thrived.
Yeah.
Whatever that dimensional space can be, however it can be defined.
There is something particular about the piano, though, because we were saying that again. I was thrust back into my childhood, and we have a piano. My parents have a piano. There is something about the way that the sounds hang in the air. Right? You saying like bathed in it. There is something particular, especially I remember discovering the pedals and how they would hang in the air even longer. And there's something about that were like other instruments, it goes away pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. To go almost counter to what I was saying when I was getting kind of woo-woo about it, but in a piano, if you hold some notes together and hold the pedal, all the other strings come into resonance, and you get insane harmonic interpolation, and you hear melodies and things happening in the ether. So it's a profoundly like dense kind of the way that happens is there's a lot of inner modulation and wonderful stuff that goes on with the piano.
Yeah.
Sure.
I wonder if that's the first instrument, and obviously this is not universal, but I wonder for a lot of people, if that's the first instrument you encounter, if you are more inclined statistically to be attracted to complex music or complex art or complex something or other. I don't mean, again, not in a one-to-one correspondence way, but there is something about like when you get trained to hear that stuff, like when I hear complex music, the joy in it for me is being able to pick out all these different things that are intersecting.
Yeah. Oh, so are you saying, do you think that the piano's a good fundamental, a good sort of basis for that, or
I wonder if it just attracts you, if it appeals to you as a child, if it then attracts you to more complex things.
Oh, completely. Oh, it did. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a lot of people say that that's a great place to start. I mean, it's I think classically, I mean, I think a lot of the first Western kind of, classical musics, I mean, they were all written, on the harpsichord and everything, although don't quote me on that, but yeah, and it's still my favorite instrument, although ironically I don't play it that much anymore. I've got my grandmother's beautiful Steinway in the living room, but I tend to leave it and come back. Once you've discovered electric guitar and amplification, that's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah. Okay, 2 last questions.
Okay.
One, I was curious, you were there when Brentwood changed around you, right?
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Did you feel even more alienated at that point? What's going on in your
I think when that started happening, I was probably going to Crossroads and had a group of friends who had famous parents and things, and I would be getting invited into people's homes that were like, whoa, this is crazy. I mean, George Carlin, we could hang out at his house, and I started to, really sort of see how the other side, and I want to say the other side because we were very comfortable in our own way, but the more of the Hollywood part of it, the actors and the producers and they all sent their kids to Crossroads, and so it was probably going on earlier than I thought, but at that point, I since I was there and living in real time, I couldn't really sense the change so much, but it's like the frog in the boiling water.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Right. But there's wealth, and then there's like, I thought like when I would go to friends' houses who like their parent was a doctor or something like that when I was a kid, I'm like, oh wow, this is wealth. And then I come out here and then, we go to someone's mansion like in Brentwood or like Beverly Hills, or even just friends of ours who like live in Larchmont. Like you go to their house and it's just like, oh, this is actual wealth. This is
exactly. It's rampant in Los Angeles. I mean, it's tucked in every nook and cranny here. But
I guess what I was curious about was like, does it, there's 2 ways you could react to it, which is like, I feel on the outside of this, or because it's around me, I am comfortable in this context and it's not, I don't feel alien.
No, I didn't feel alien in a way. I mean, my grandmother, they had a beautiful house in kind of Bel Air, Westwood, and she was an interior decorator, and I was adjacent enough in many ways where it didn't. I wasn't in awe really. I felt like, oh, I'm from this situation, but I don't ascribe to having it in the same way myself in my life.
Interesting. Okay, last question. How did Crossroads affect you or affect your path or your creativity?
Yeah. I mean, oddly enough, well, I wasn't a great student because I have a very lazy focus where if I'm not really digging something, I can't, I don't know if I'm attention deficit, but I hated doing homework. I hated writing papers. If the teacher was somehow inspiring character or something, and I felt, then I would actually rally and do well in a class if the teacher really kind of got me somehow inspired, would it be inspirational? But so I didn't do that well there in a way, but it's mainly just they nurtured creative people. They had a great music department and a great drama department, which I loved being part of. I would play piano in some of the plays, and I would do lights. And so, I'm glad I went to public school before that and got some nitty gritty, some just real world, relatively experience. But Crossroads was this rarefied kind of experiment. I mean, I started there in the 70s, and they had a smoking area, and they'd play Fleetwood Mac and Led Zeppelin for the bell instead of a bell. And a lot of the teachers were all a little subculture-y and kind of offbeat and everything. So early on, it was kind of exciting, but then it really changed very quickly. It noticeably changed and became a real prep school, and I think more wealthy, successful people's kids were going, and it changed a bit. But I can't say that it was so formative in my life, but I could be wrong. It's hard to. I wish I could be more definitive on this one. If I had just gone to Paul Revere or something, I don't know if I wouldn't have been privy to the sort of student body. They were just a fascinating bunch of people. But I mean, I'm sure that would be true anywhere. But what I could speak to is that a lot of very household name kind of artists and people have come from that school, and it's not so huge that it's just because it's that. There's something about it. I think Paul Cummins, who started it, had a vision, and he's definitely onto something. I can't really
in terms of
what that is.
In terms of like how the classes are taught, or like is it like Montessori type kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, or even just choosing the teachers and the curriculum maybe was tweaked a little bit. I can't really compare it to much else, but there was definitely some kind of unique ethos there that kids really respond to. My nieces have gone, and they loved it and seem to have a lot of the elements that one needs to thrive in the world. And so it's just a good school, and I don't know what that means. What makes a school great. But we felt like we were appreciated as individuals, and that some of the teachers were just very inspired, wonderful leaders, and.
Okay, well then this is the real last question then.
Okay.
At what point did you decide for yourself this is actually my identity? Like, I'm going to be a musician, or like this is my actual path, as opposed to like, well, I like piano and I'm playing this, and do you know what I mean? Like there's usually a point.
It was early on. I think really early. I think I remember fantasize. I think there was a movie called Bangladesh or something. It was George Harrison had a festival to help Bangladesh poverty something, and all these musicians came and took part, and I remember that really affected me in the record cover, and I just fantasized about just being on stage and and what the lights would be like and what the drum set would look like. And so I've always known. And I think the best for Idaho is yet to come. I'm a late bloomer, but I finally, I think, have the the faculties to like pull it off and maybe expand it a little bit from its few hundred cult followers.
I love that. Also, by the way, that the idea of expanding it, I'm imagining in your mind, it's a big 70s style drum kind of thing with all the like chimes and the like
the gong.
octatons and stuff like. Is that what they're called? Those,
That's right. Yeah, octa something. Yeah. No, that's still in there. It was a good time to be raised and to be into music. That's for sure.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. This is such a delight.
Sure, Andy. Yeah, I hope you can edit that to make some sense. But
I think it makes sense without editing.
Okay.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh.